Last year, my family went on a trip to San Francisco because my dad had a conference or something, and we decided to take advantage of it and make it into a vacation of sorts. It was it was a very nice trip. As a queer person, I got to learn a lot about the queer history of San Francisco and walk where a lot of people I feel a kinship towards walked when you couldn't see a leather pride flag hanging out of a window. I took photos of the Golden Gate Bridge, biked through the Golden Gate Park, and rode historic trolleys. It was an amazing time, and if it wasn't so damn expensive, I might enjoy living there someday. But what I really want to talk about is one of the days when my dad had his conference and my younger sibling and my mom and I needed to kill some time. Our Airbnb came with a couple of free passes to the San Francisco Zoo, so we decided to head over there and kill a day. It was there where we saw the gorilla exhibit. Big primates in captivity always make me a little bit uncomfortable. They are so similar to us, so very close, that I wonder the ethics of it every time I see it. The San Francisco Zoo is part of conservation efforts for this particular type of gorilla, and they contribute to their species' survival and breeding. These gorillas likely would not fare very well outside of captivity. So even though I know that I am not a bad person for seeing these animals in this context, that this is doing good for the species as a whole, but still, there is a small part of me that feels deep guilt and sadness that it has to be this way. That this is the only way for these creatures to reach me. That their imprisonment is necessary to their continued existence. There were a few females in the exhibit and one beautiful silverback male. When we came to them, they had some lettuce that they were snacking on. One of the females, took as much as she could and climbed up to the highest rock in the area to eat it, which was very endearing, but for the most part, they weren't moving very much, just kind of sitting and eating. We came over to a glass window that let us look at the gorillas at eye level. The male was closest, sitting in the grass a few feet away from the window. My family was the only one close to the glass, and we were pretty quiet and pensive, as we always get when we visit the large primate exhibits at zoos. As we watched, the silverback noticed us. To our surprise, he came over to the window, propping up a cylindrical toy and sitting on it as if it were a stool. He was right there. Right across the glass. My heart swooped with the kind of nerves you get when you're trying to make a good impression on someone you feel guilty towards. Almost as a greeting to him, I placed my hand on the glass. He looked at it for a few seconds before placing his own directly across from mine. Mere centimeters separated his leathery black palm from my soft pink one, but I felt something shift in me. I looked into his eyes, which were startlingly intelligent and soft. Dimly, I remembered eye contact was a sign of aggression in some animals, so I didn't hold it for very long. But I knew in my heart that this creature was my equal. The glass separating us was both nothing and everything at the same time. I was an ape, and he was an ape. We were not so different, him and I, and yet I was the one who got to walk away from this situation, and he was the one who had to stay. I am so sorry, I wanted to say. I am so sorry that it has to be this way. His fingernails were long and not so different from my own. His palm had fingerprints. His eyes looked at me with curiosity and a docile, quiet melancholy. I will never forget that man that I met that day. I will never forget how our moment of understanding was cut short when a noisy group with kids saw the gorilla, and not him, and pushed my group out of the way. I sometimes wonder if he remembers me, or if human watching is something that he does regularly and I was just a blip in a routine for him. I wonder if he is bored, or if he is happy, if he will recognize me again if I ever get the chance to visit him. I know that much of it is romanticizing him, but that moment changed something in me. It changed me in a way I did not know I needed to be changed. I wonder if he was as sad as I was when our quiet moment was ended. I know he had a name given to him by the humans who raised him, but I wonder if he has a name for himself more akin to his species. I wonder, but he will always be a mystery to me. This moment got me thinking about a book that was an OBOB reading when I was in elementary school. OBOB is Oregon Battle of the Books, for those of you who don't know. It was called The One and Only Ivan by Kathrine Applegate. It's a pretty short and easy read, but for some reason, I keep coming back to it at different points in my life, and I get something new from it every time. It is a story about a silverback gorilla named Ivan, who lives in a glass box at a roadside circus called the Big Top Mall and Video Arcade. At the beginning, he is mostly content with his simple life, but as the novel progresses, he fights and fights for a better one. Not for his sake, exactly, but for the sake of a small elephant named Ruby, who Ivan swore he would protect. It is a story about loss and destruction of one's identity and the carelessness of humans. It is a story about what it means to truly be alive, and when it is imperative to start fighting for it. There's a passage in this book that comes back to me a lot whenever I'm particularly burnt out or depressed. It has managed to stay with me since elementary school, coming back whenever I need it most. "Stella," I say after Julia and her father go home, "I can't sleep." "Of course you can," she says. "You are the king of sleepers." "Shh," Bob says from his perch on my belly. "I'm dreaming about chili fries." "I'm tired," I say, "but I'm not sleepy." "What are you tired of?" Stella asks. I think for a while. It's hard to put into words. Gorillas are not complainers. We're dreamers, poets, philosophers, nap takers. "I don't know, exactly." I kick up my tire swing. "I think I may be a little tired of my domain." "That's because it's a cage," Bob tells me. I am tired, but I am not sleepy. It is a saying that I feel describes me. I live by it. I am not ready to sleep. I am tired of the way my world is. I am tired of my domain because I feel it is a cage. This is a cage. And if it were not a cage, I would do so much. But it is, and I am tired of it. I am tired of this. I am tired to my very bones. But my bed does not hold my answer. The simplicity of this book, how it sets up a status quo and then knocks it down, is one of the most moving pieces of literature I have ever read. The beginning describes a monotonous life of sticky people with sticky foods, buying meaningless things with green paper that smells of many hands. Ivan's monologue is exactly as it is. He puts very little into his feelings about the matter. We are told the foods he likes and the people he likes. We are told he likes to draw. But other than that, everything is just as it is. Ivan is desensitized to his surroundings. People look at him and leave. In a passage where he presses his unique nose print to the glass of his so-called domain, he says, "The man wipes the glass, and I am gone." In a passage called Imagination, he says, "Mostly I think about what is, and not what could be. I've learned not to get my hopes up." Ivan is an artist, drawing in crayon things he finds in his domain that the owner of the mall puts in a gift shop for people to buy for $20 a piece, $25 with frame. He only draws what he can see. The daughter of the custodian, Julia, introduced him to art. She can draw anything her mind can come up with, but Ivan cannot. He draws bananas and candy wrappers and occasionally beetles. He cannot think about what was, or what could be, or even what could never be. Ivan is stuck. I often feel like Ivan, sitting in my domain, unable to see what could be, unwilling to see the benefits of imagining something different. This is just how it is, isn't it? I don't think about the times it was different, and I don't imagine it will be different in the future. So, what is the point? It is a waste of precious energy. Instead, I will sit here in my box, watching people who might as well be a different species to me in another little box as I go about my days as a stagnant creature. I fall into this pattern a lot. I don't know if it is due in part to the way the world drains me as an autistic person, or if it is an issue I just have that I will always wrestle with. There is merit in knowing what you can change and changing what you can, but I don't see the merit in not trying to figure out what the problem is. And yet I get comfortable in complacency. Ivan lives next to an elephant named Stella, who lives in a so-called domain made from metal bars. She is very old and used to be in a big traveling circus. She tells Ivan stories, either from her life or one she heard about, and she is Ivan's oldest friend. She has a bad foot, injured long ago by a human, that never healed quite right. Sometimes it gets infected, and she lays on the ground for days. Stella seems to know that she is in a bad situation. While Ivan never thinks of his life before, Stella always does. Stella seems to know that there is no way out for her. She is never going to see the savannah again. She will die in this cramped metal cage. But her friend calls it a domain and adds joy to her life, and that will have to be enough for her. And so she tells stories, and he tells her that the sun is a ripe tangerine in the sky, and they are companions, together, but still apart. I too often feel like this. There is something in me that makes me feel like I am not like my peers, something that stops me from truly connecting with them. For most of my life, I have felt older than my peers, like Stella in her cage speaking to Ivan. And of course, there are the people who feel like they are my Stellas. And I don't know how to feel about that. There are people who go their whole lives and never get back home. Sure, there are bright spots, good people despite everything, but they spend it all in a cage right next to yours. Some, the Ivans, call it something else, a domain. Not because they are consciously trying to make light of a bad situation, but because they have never known anything else. This is freedom to them. There is no other world, and the one we used to have is dead now. So what's the point? What's the point of being an elephant? There is a dog named Bob, too. He is scrappy and tiny. He's a stray. He spends his life looking for edible garbage and taking naps on Ivan's wide stomach. Bob claims he is happy with this life, and like Ivan, he at least seems complacent. He claims that humans disgust him too much for him to let them adopt him, but sometimes Ivan sees him letting Julia pet him. Bob is like Ivan in the way that he does not want life to change, but he is different than Ivan in the ways that he sees the world. Bob cannot be caged. He cannot imagine a world where he is taken care of by humans, not the same humans who threw him and his litter into a ditch from the window of a moving car. Bob is a wanderer, he claims, of his own volition. But Bob is still dependent on humans. He eats their garbage, he lives in their dumpsters. All of his friends are under their control. Bob is, at his core, desperate to not be lonely, and he is clinging onto this aura of self-sufficiency so that he doesn't have to face a reality where he might be alone. However, at the end of the day, he is dependent on the creatures that he claims to despise so. And at the end of the day, He does choose a home with them because he does not want to be alone. I have also been Bob. I have pushed away people because I did not think they would understand me. I have told myself I need no one but myself. But that is simply not true. I cannot pretend to be above a system I am a participant of, and I cannot pretend I am self-reliant when I am relying on everyone around me. These characters live a quiet life, performing in the small circus acts, or, in Ivan's case, simply eating a ton in front of the visitors. This routine is interrupted when Stella hears something in the wind. Someone is coming. An elephant. A baby. You're just hoping, says Ivan. No, says Stella. Not hoping. Not at all. Ruby is a baby elephant. She is wide-eyed, and she asks many questions about Ivan's life that he isn't prepared to answer. She has been hurt by humans, taken from her home, and hit with claw sticks, but she has also been saved by humans. When she was living in the wild, she fell into a well, and humans pulled her out and led her home. She is not jaded like Bob, and she is not sheltered like Ivan. She has not lost hope like Stella. She is new, and she disrupts the status quo. Ruby asks Ivan many things. She asks him for stories. She asks him for jokes. Ivan tells the only elephant joke he knows, but leaves the stories for Stella. Shortly after Ruby arrives, Stella's foot gets infected. She lays on the floor of the cage she spent so much of her life in, and she asks Ivan one thing, one favor. Make sure Ruby gets out of here. And then she is gone. And Ivan has a promise to keep. This is the moment where Ivan gains a purpose he was missing his whole life. He never had a life besides his own to drive him to action, but now he has a promise to keep. He knows that if he does not keep his promise, Ruby will die in that cage as well. And it is not a domain. It's a cage. And Ivan forces himself to remember. Have you ever had that moment when you realize your own situation is horrible because you see the people you love are in it too? You can ignore all of your own traumas, you can forget how to see red flags, but when you look over your shoulder, you realize that the ones you love are also being destroyed, like you were. Did it finally stir you to action? Or was there nothing you could do? Ivan remembers being a child, clinging to his mother's back, painting pictures on it with mud. He remembers being named after that thing he loved so, Mud. He remembers his sister, Tack. He remembers his father, a strong and mighty silverback. And he remembers the men who came and shot them and cut off their hands and took him and his sister. He remembers being in a crate with his sister as she could not let go of the rainforest and died next to him. He remembers being raised by the mall owner as a human child until he got too bothersome and was taken to the big top. And he begins to process his trauma. He has a stuffed gorilla in his domain. He named it Not Tag, because it was not Tag. There was a store near his cage. It sells ashtrays made of gorilla hands. And this is where the book changes. The story. I look at the ring layered with fresh sawdust. I look at the skylight and the half-hidden moon. I just thought of a story, I say. Is it a made-up story or a true one? Ruby asks. True, I say. I hope. Ruby leans against the bars. Her eyes hold the pale moon in them, the way a still pond holds stars. Once upon a time, I say, there was a baby elephant. She was smart and brave, and she needed to go to a place called a zoo. What's a zoo? Ruby asks. A zoo, Ruby, is a place where humans make amends. A good zoo is a safe place where humans care for animals and keep them safe. Did the baby elephant go to the zoo? Ruby asks softly. I don't answer right away. Yes, I say at last. How did she get there? Ruby asks. She had a friend, I say. A friend who made a promise. Ivan begins the endeavor of trying to make people see that he needs out, he needs out, he needs out. No longer is it a book about the simple life of a roadside gorilla. It is now a book about the roadside attraction owner Mac training Ruby with cruel methods while Ivan tries to communicate with Julia and her dad that they need to go to a place where they can be taken care of. The book is written in a very interesting style. It is cut into slice-of-life style fragments of Ivan's life, starting with a simple greeting. Hello, I am Ivan. I am a gorilla. It's not as easy as it looks. It creates a sense of intimacy and a slow pacing, making us really feel like we are in the mind of Ivan. These fragments can be paragraphs, or they can be a few sentences. It almost feels like reading a book of short poems. It's hard to tell how much time passes between the fragments, but it feels slow and down to earth. I couldn't think of a better way to get into the mind of Ivan, to live life how he lives it through the medium of words. After Stella dies, though, the slow pacing of the book becomes more of an entrapment. The days slide by in a haze, and Ivan is working desperately by night to paint his way out of the situation. You can feel Ivan's frustration. This is taking too long, and it's not right. Not yet. You start to feel his desperation, how trapped he is. The endless ebb and flow we have become used to becomes almost stifling. And in that way, the readers are Ivan. It's curious to me why Applegate chose the name Ivan, a name associated with the other name, the Terrible. Maybe it was to further show the difference between what Ivan is advertised as on the billboard and what he actually is. The freeway billboard has a drawing of Mac in his clown clothes and Stella on her hind legs and an angry animal with fierce eyes and unkempt hair. The animal is supposed to be me, but the artist made a mistake. I am never angry. This is not Ivan the Terrible we are working with. This is Ivan the Peaceful, Ivan the Desperate, Ivan the Hurt Terribly. I'm now going to talk about the human characters in the book, starting with the most complicated and working my way down. Mac owns the Big Top Mall and video arcade. Ivan does not question him, just knows he is a fixture in his life. Like most things, Ivan seems to like him neutrally. Mac is a very interesting character, because he's never entirely a villain. He is almost sympathetic. We get views of his character in slices from Ivan's POV. He raised Ivan incorrectly, treating him like a human baby as if there would be no consequences of that. It's unclear how he acquired Ivan, but it doesn't seem entirely legal, considering Ivan was taken from the rainforest through poaching and not humanely. He seems to have anger problems and very little patience. Ivan describes him having a wife while he was living in Mac's house, but after months of screaming, she left. It seems as if Ivan's presence was not helping the relationship. Mac has a money-focused worldview, not necessarily consciously, but in a way that depersonifies the people and creatures around him. When Julia gives Ivan paper and crayons, Mac sees money signs and starts to sell Ivan's precious artwork for $20 a piece, $25 with frame. You can tell he cares about Ivan, but he is a sad little man who doesn't know what he's doing and is so driven by profit that he ends up doing far more harm than good. He does not know how to solve his problems. In other words, he is a roadside zoo owner. Ivan's feelings about Mac shift through the book. At first, Ivan seems to love Mac. Then he seems to see him for what he is. In a passage where Mac brings out a claw stick to try to get Ruby to do tricks, Ivan is glad when she hits him in the soft spot. Mac is a sad, strange little man. He deserves to lose what has come to be his life because he has based his life off of exploitation and abuse. George is the custodian and the keeper of Ivan and the father of Julia. He mops the floor at night and wipes the fingerprints from Ivan's glass. He seems like someone who is just trying to get by. There is a sense of tragedy to him, like he is stuck in a spot he can't quite get out of. And perhaps the most important of the three, Julia, George's younger daughter, who loves more than anything to draw. She talks to Ivan from the heart and is the only one of the humans who makes an effort to try to understand what Ivan is trying to say. She's the only one who sees Ivan's art as more than just mindless scribbles and tries to figure out what it is that he has drawn. Without Julia, Ivan would still be in a glass box on the side of the road. Julia represents a lot of things in this story, most importantly the part of childhood that makes us believe that animals are magical creatures. At a certain age, animals become mundane, and people brush past their sentience to make themselves feel better. Julia calls Ivan an artist. When it's clear that Ruby or Stella is suffering, Julia notices and says something. It is Julia who understands when Ivan shows the thing he created to save Ruby, and it is Julia who understands Ivan on a fundamental level. When George brushes off Ivan's gestures, Julia takes them very seriously and convinces George to take action. While the story changes for Ivan when he makes the promise to Stella, the story changes for the humans when, one night, Ivan desperately tries to show Julia and George the huge painting puzzle he has created. He shoves them through the hole in the glass, holding them up as much as possible. Here, it might just be best to read it to you. I display another picture, and then another, and another, and another, each one a tiny part of the whole. Julia looks confused. But what is it? She asks. She shrugs. It doesn't matter. It's pretty just as it is. Uh-oh, says Thelma the parrot. No, I think no. It does matter. More paintings. George calls out to Julia. He's done for the night. Grab your backpack, he says, and hurry, it's late. Gotta go, Ivan, Julia says. Julia doesn't understand. I have to find the right pieces. I dig through the pile. They're here somewhere. I know they are. I find one, another. I try to hold 4 of them up against the glass. Bob, I say, help me. Hurry. Bob grabs paintings with his teeth and drags them to me. One by one, I shove pictures through the window crack. They crumple and tear. There are too many pieces. My puzzle is too big. Careful, Ivan, Julia says. Those might be worth millions someday. You never know. She arranges the paintings into a neat stack. I suppose Mac is going to want to sell these in the gift shop. She still doesn't understand. I shove more out of the hole and more, all of them, one after the other. So Ivan's been painting, has he? George says as he puts on his coat. A lot, Julia says with a laugh. A whole lot. You're not taking all those home with you, are you? George asks. I mean, no offense to Ivan, but they're just blobs. Julia thumbs through the towering stack of paintings. They might not be blobs to Ivan. Let's leave them by the office, George suggests. Mac will want to try selling them. Although why anyone would pay $40 for a finger painting a 2-year-old can make, I don't know. I like Ivan's work, Julia said. He puts his feelings into them. He puts his hair into them, George says. Julia waves goodbye. Night, Ivan. Night, Bob. I press my nose against the glass and watch her walk away. All my work, all my planning wasted. I look at Ruby sleeping soundly, and suddenly I know she'll never leave the Big Top Mall. She'll be here forever. Just like Stella. I can't let Ruby be another one and only. Chest beating. Often when visitors come to see me, they beat their hands against their puny chests, pretending to be me. They pound away, soundless as the wet wings of a new butterfly. The chest beating of a mad gorilla is not something you ever want to hear. Not even if you're wearing earplugs. Not even if you're 3 miles away wearing earplugs. A real chest beating sends the whole jungle running, as if the sky has broken open, as if men with guns are near. Angry. Thump. The sound, my sound, echoes through the mall. George and Julia spin around. Julia drops her backpack. George drops his keys. The pile of pictures goes flying. Thump, thump, thump. I bounce off the walls. I screech and bellow. I beat and beat my chest. Bob hides under Not Tag, his paws over his ears. I'm angry at last. I have someone to protect. Earlier in the book, Ivan describes a silverback's anger as precious and only for protection. He finally has someone to be angry for, and the humans can finally see his anger. I want to try to examine the reason this story sticks with me so much. I think it has something to do with the way that every dynamic in the story can be applied to so many real-world problems. It is layered in metaphor, but the point of the story is not reliant of it. I feel like I am Ivan. I feel like I was once Ruby. I feel like I am trying to not be Bob. I feel like if I am not careful, I will be Stella. The story's unique writing style and drip feeding of information makes the story feel distinct and powerful. Well, have you ever read a book and just kind of smelled the Newbery metal off of it? Newbery books all have a common feeling to them, and this one has that. But it also has an element to it I haven't seen done in the same way before. Things are hardly ever said outright, but are implied masterfully throughout. They invite you to think, and they invite you to apply the themes to your own life as well. And I have. At the end of the book, Ivan and Ruby get sent to a zoo, where the enclosures are far more humane, and the people know how to take care of the animals they're keeping. Ivan paints a picture in mud on the wall of the new cage, the bigger cage. The wall is endless, clean and white, stretching far down the habitats beyond my own. It's high and wide, carefully built to keep us in and others out. This is, after all, still a cage. It rained last night, and the pile of dirt is soft to the touch. I scoop up a handful and breathe in the loamy smell. It's a rich brown color, heavy and cool in my palm. And the wall waits like an endless blank billboard. And it's not entirely a happy ending. I know there are 2 sequels to this book, but I haven't bothered to read them, partially because I'm not quite as interested in them, and partly because I am afraid they'll ruin what I think is a perfect book ending. The ending is Ivan in a bigger cage, but he's with his own kind, and he is doing what he loves. A zoo, the book says multiple times throughout, is where humans go to make amends. I'll go back to the San Francisco Zoo, back to the silverback who pressed his palm across from my own. Oscar. That was his name. I hope he is doing well. I hope, like Ivan, he has found peace. Thank you for watching. Do all the stuff if you enjoyed it. I'm working on a full breakdown of the series of Unfortunate Events books that will be very long. I'm reading all of them again right now, and I'll take you through my thoughts on them. Or I won't, and I'll just drop all of this entirely. Who knows? I'm just having fun over here. Anyway, ta-ta! Have a nice day.